You do not kill humans, you harm one of them, and the rest will hunt you down. It doesn't matter where you go or how well you hide. The voice reverberated through the council chamber, each word punctuated with the gravity of centuries of experience. The Council of the Atraxian Coalition, composed of 10 alien species, convened to discuss one pressing matter: whether to approve a raid on a human colony. A low murmur rippled through the chamber as the council members absorbed the weight of the decision before them. Most of the council members regarded the threat of humanity with skepticism. After all, humanity was a newcomer to the galactic scene, barely out of their cradle compared to the ancient species seated around the massive stone table. The room, dimly lit, was adorned with intricate carvings that depicted the history of their species: wars fought, alliances forged, and empires built. Yet, here they were, contemplating an action against a race still finding its place among the stars. Zarkin, the leader of the Sevruk and one of the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy, leaned forward, his silver scales glinting under the dim light. As he addressed the council, his voice carried a weight that demanded attention. "We have faced species more brutal than humans," Zarkin began, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of dissent. "They are loud, yes, aggressive, certainly. But this fear you speak of is exaggerated." The silence that followed Zarkin's words was palpable, filled with tension as the council members exchanged glances. It was broken by a gravelly voice, belonging to Veluk, a grizzled commander from the Scion, a race known for their military expertise. His presence commanded respect, with battle scars crisscrossing his leathery skin. "You say exaggerated, Zarkin, but I've seen what they do," Veluk replied, locking eyes with the Servuk leader. "I fought against them in the Third Rim conflict. We had the advantage: technology, numbers, terrain. We even captured one of their commanders." Zarkin crossed his arms, unimpressed. "And they never tried to negotiate. They never sent a request for his return, not a single message. Instead, they waited in silence for weeks. Nothing. Then, in one night, they wiped out 3 of our battalions. We never even saw them coming." Veluk's voice dropped to a low growl, resonating with the memories of loss. "And they took him back. Every single man we lost." The chamber grew quiet, the gravity of Veluk's statement sinking in. Even Zarkin seemed to reconsider his stance. The chair of the council, a thin, tall figure named Trevak, finally spoke. Known for his neutrality and wisdom, Trevak raised a long, clawed hand to Veluk. "We understand your perspective, Veluk," he began, his voice calm yet firm. "But we must weigh the potential benefits of this raid. The human outpost is in a strategic position on the edge of their territory. Their resources are abundant, and their defenses are minimal." Veluk shook his head vehemently. "Minimal doesn't mean weak. You think because they're small in number, they're vulnerable. I'm telling you, you'll regret underestimating them." Another voice spoke up, this time Gorvek, a member of the Veluk, a race infamous for their ruthless pirating operations. His dark, leathery skin rippled as he laughed, the sound harsh and dismissive. "We're the ones doing the hunting here, Veluk, not the other way around. Humans may be cunning, but they're still flesh and blood. They die like anyone else." "They don't die like anyone else," Veluk snapped, his voice sharp, cutting through the tension. "You kill one human, and 100 more will come after you. They won't stop, not until you're dead or worse." Trevak raised a hand to calm the growing tension in the room. Velik, your experiences are noted, but we must also consider the facts. The humans are outnumbered. They're isolated on this outpost. A well-coordinated strike could neutralize them before they have the chance to retaliate. Velik stood, his face grim, frustration evident in his posture. You don't understand. It's not about their numbers or their weapons, it's about their mindset. They don't fight like we do. They don't give up when they should. They adapt, they learn, and they hit back harder every time. Gorvek stepped closer, a mocking smile creeping across his face. Then let them try, he challenged. As the council session drew to a close, Trivak motioned for the vote to begin. One by one, the council members pressed their decision into the console before them. The majority had sided with Gorvek, swayed by the promise of resources and power. The raid was approved. Velik watched in silence, knowing what was coming. He had done his part, tried to warn them, but they would ignore the warning just as so many others had. The consequences would be dire. On the outskirts of human space, a small outpost blinked with the rhythm of life. It was a quiet station meant for monitoring trade routes and maintaining a supply line between colonies. The few humans stationed there had little to do but watch the stars and await their next shift. Inside the command center, Lieutenant Marcus Kane leaned back in his chair, staring at the feed from the surrounding sectors. Everything was quiet, too quiet, perhaps. Anything interesting out there? Sergeant Harris asked, walking over with 2 cups of coffee, one of which he handed to Kane. Same as always, just space, Kane replied, accepting the cup with a nod. Harris chuckled. Yeah, well, enjoy the peace. You know it never lasts. Kane smirked. Tell me about it. Suddenly, one of the screens flickered to life. Kane leaned forward, squinting at the incoming data. Hold on, we've got something. Harris sat down, his coffee forgotten, instantly alert. What is it? Unidentified vessels, 6 of them. Raiders. Kane's fingers flew across the console, the urgency of the situation igniting his adrenaline. Harris moved to the intercom. All hands, prepare for potential contact. Looks like we've got visitors. The lights in the station dimmed as the crew prepared for battle. Kane's heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained calm. They'd faced worse odds before. All right, Kane muttered, his eyes narrowing at the display. Let's see what these bastards want. The ships appeared on the sensors, closing in fast. Kane and Harris exchanged a glance. The outpost was isolated, its defenses were minimal. But they had one thing the attackers didn't: experience. Let's give them a warm welcome, Kane said. As the alien vessels moved within range, the humans stood ready, their fingers poised over the triggers. Kane knew what was at stake. It wasn't just their lives on the line, it was the message they would send back. The alien vessels moved in, positioning themselves in an arc around the outpost. To them, it was a routine raid. They'd done this countless times before: hit an isolated station, take what they wanted, leave nothing behind. But this wasn't just any target, this was a human outpost, and they had no idea what was coming. Kane's eyes darted between the incoming signals on the radar. The enemy ships were fast, but he noticed something: impatience in their movement. They weren't cautious, they were overconfident. Sergeant, they're coming in hot, Kane said, his voice low and calm. His hands hovered over the console, steady as ever. Good. Let them come, Harris replied, standing just behind Kane, scanning the room as the rest of the crew took up positions. We've been trained for this. The alien ships drew closer. Through the forward viewport, Kane could see their sleek forms cutting through space like knives, 6 of them, armed to the teeth, expecting an easy kill. Kane hit the intercom. Attention all personnel, engage defensive protocols. This is not a drill. Prepare for hostile engagement. The station's automated defenses came to life. Cannons slid out from their hidden compartments, shields hummed to life, and warning lights flashed throughout the facility. The crew snapped into action, their faces set. They had been ready for this moment, but the aliens thought they were still in control. Kane watched the radar carefully, waiting for the right moment. Wait for it, he said, feeling the tension in the air. Harris leaned in. Shouldn't we hit them now while they're still grouping? No, let them get closer, Kane replied, his eyes locked on the incoming ships. He could feel the anticipation hanging in the air. Closer. The alien ships moved into attack formation, their weapons primed and ready. They were practically in the station's blind spot, exactly where they thought the humans wouldn't see them. Kane's finger hovered over the button. Now. With a single press, the outpost's defense systems roared to life. The station's cannons fired bright streaks of energy, cutting through the darkness of space. The alien ships recoiled as explosions erupted along their flanks. 2 of them were hit instantly, their hulls shattered, drifting away in pieces. Direct hit. Harris shouted, a grin spreading across his face. The crew cheered as the alien ships faltered, but Kane didn't let his guard down. They'd only just begun. As the remaining ships scrambled to regain their formation, Kane directed the fire toward the largest vessel. Keep up the pressure. Target their weapon systems. The station shook under the impact of return fire, but the crew held firm, moving with precision and determination. Kane could see the aliens struggling, their confidence wavering as they lost control over the situation. They're breaking formation. Harris shouted, excitement bubbling in his voice. The enemy vessels scattered, their tactics failing them in the face of a determined human defense. Kane could feel the tide shifting, they were no longer the prey but the predators. Keep up the fire, he barked, urging his crew on. The station's defenses found their mark time and time again, sending the remaining raiders into chaos. They're abandoning ship, one of the crew called out, eyes wide with disbelief. Kane couldn't help but feel a swell of pride, they had turned the tide against overwhelming odds. But as the last alien vessel slipped into the void, a new sense of dread filled him. They had fought hard, but this battle was only the beginning. The Council of the Atraxian Coalition would not take this lightly. There would be repercussions. Hours later, as the adrenaline faded and silence returned to the station, Kane sat alone in the command center, reviewing the data. They had survived, but at what cost? The tension in the air felt heavy, a palpable reminder of the fragility of their victory. The control panel flickered, and Kane could see the aftermath of the battle, a display of twisted metal and remnants of the alien ships. Lieutenant, Harris said, entering the room. The crew is celebrating in the mess hall. We did it. Kane nodded, a slight smile breaking through the grim facade. Yeah, we did. But we need to stay vigilant. This isn't over. The celebration continued outside the command center, but Kane's mind was elsewhere. The Council of the Atraxian Coalition would regroup, and they would come back. He knew they would. The aliens had resources, they were relentless. And if there was one thing humanity had learned, it was that their victories would only serve to make them a bigger target. As the crew celebrated, Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they had just scratched the surface of a much larger conflict. The galactic stage was set for a showdown between humanity and the ancient powers that ruled the stars. Would they be able to hold their ground, or would they fall into the darkness like so many before them? Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, the Atraxian Coalition convened once again, this time with urgency. They had underestimated humanity, and the council was rife with tension. Travak stood before them, his tone grave. The humans have demonstrated that they are not to be trifled with. This raid was supposed to be a show of strength, but it has backfired. We lost 2 ships, and they emerged victorious. We cannot allow this to continue. Zarkin's scales shimmered in the low light as he replied, they fought with courage, yes, but it was luck. We can't let one victory against the odds sway our course. We need to plan a more coordinated attack, an overwhelming force that will make them rethink any further resistance. Velik shifted uncomfortably, haunted by the memories of the battle. What if it isn't just luck? What if they're learning, adapting? We need to approach this with caution. Gorvek laughed again, the sound echoing in the chamber. Caution is for the weak. We have the numbers, we have the firepower. We need to show them who is in control. It's time to end this farce once and for all. The council erupted into chaos, voices raised, each member arguing for their perspective. Travak, struggling to maintain order, finally banged his clawed hand on the table, silencing the room. We need a plan, one that accounts for their adaptability, their cunning. We cannot underestimate them again. I propose we gather intelligence. We need to understand their tactics, their weaknesses, and exploit them. A murmur of agreement rippled through the council, but the tension remained thick in the air. They all knew that the next move would be crucial. It could mean the difference between a decisive victory or total annihilation. As discussions continued, plans were made, strategies developed. They would not rush into this battle, they would observe, learn, and then strike when the time was right. In the dimly lit chamber, surrounded by centuries of history, the members of the Atraxian Coalition plotted their revenge. Back at the human outpost, celebrations turned into discussions about strategy and defense. Kane gathered his crew, addressing them with urgency. We won this battle, but the war is far from over. We need to fortify our defenses, gather intelligence on the Atraxian Coalition, and prepare for their next move. The crew nodded, the earlier exhilaration replaced by a solemn understanding of the stakes involved. They had become a symbol of resistance, and now they needed to live up to that legacy. Each member of the crew knew they had a part to play, and together, they began to lay the groundwork for what would come next. Days turned into weeks as they worked tirelessly to strengthen their position. Kane oversaw the installation of new defenses, the training of additional personnel, and the gathering of intelligence from any sources they could find. The tension was ever present, a constant reminder of the looming threat. Meanwhile, deep within the Atraxian Coalition, the tension was palpable. Zarkin, Travak, and Velik exchanged glances as they reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The humans were adapting rapidly, learning from their encounters. It was no longer just a matter of brute strength, it was a battle of wits and strategy. I fear they are more prepared than we anticipated, Velik admitted, his voice low. We may have underestimated their resolve, but we cannot let that show. Zarkin nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Then we must strike at their core, target their leadership, disrupt their command structure. If we can take out their key players, the rest will crumble. Travak frowned, concern etched on his face. That's a risky maneuver. We could lose our chance for a clean victory if they anticipate our moves. But Zarkin was resolute. We can't afford to hesitate. If we wait too long, they'll grow even stronger. We have to take the fight to them, but it has to be a surgical strike. As discussions continued, a plan began to take shape, one that would send shockwaves through the human ranks. They would attack the outpost, but with a twist, they would focus on intelligence gathering and high-value targets instead of a full assault. The aim was to destabilize the human leadership and sow chaos within their ranks. Back at the human outpost, Kane received intelligence reports indicating increased Atraxian activity. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he realized they were being watched, monitored. He gathered his crew once more, urgency painted across his face. They're preparing for something big. We need to remain vigilant. They won't give up easily. Harris spoke up, what if we send out scouts? We can gather intelligence of our own. Good idea, Kane replied. We need to know what they're planning. We can't afford any surprises. The crew worked tirelessly, sending out reconnaissance ships to gather information on the Atraxian movements. They would not be caught off guard again. The threat was real, but they had survived once. They could do it again. As days passed, Kane felt the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. His crew looked to him for guidance, and he had to ensure they remained prepared. The pressure mounted, but he refused to show any signs of weakness. They were fighting not just for survival, but for their right to exist in a galaxy that had long forgotten their kind. As the Atraxian forces drew closer, Kane strategized with his crew on how to defend against the impending attack. They reinforced their defenses, updated protocols, and ensured that every crew member was aware of their roles. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Sensors picked up movement, a fleet of Atraxian ships headed straight for the outpost. Kane's heart raced as he gathered his crew, their faces a mixture of fear and determination. Listen up, he shouted, commanding their attention. This is it. We've trained for this, we've prepared. They think they can take us down, but we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for every human in this galaxy. Let's show them what we're made of. The crew erupted in cheers, their spirits ignited by Kane's words. They took their positions, adrenaline coursing through their veins as the Atraxian ships drew closer. Kane focused on the radar display, tracking the enemy vessels as they approached. They were coming in hot, their formations tight, clearly expecting a quick victory. Hold fire until they're in range. Kane barked, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. As the ships closed in, Kane could feel the tension building. Now! Open fire! The station erupted with energy blasts, lighting up the darkness of space as they targeted the oncoming ships. The Atraxian vessels retaliated, but the humans were prepared. The station's defenses were strong, and Kane guided his crew with precision, directing their fire toward the largest enemy ship. Explosions rocked the battlefield as the two forces clashed, the vacuum of space filled with the sound of conflict. The Atraxians began to falter, their formations breaking as they struggled to maintain control. Keep up the pressure. Target their engines. Kane shouted, his heart pounding with adrenaline. As the battle raged on, Kane could see the tide shifting once more. They were not just holding their ground, they were pushing back. The crew fought with determination, refusing to give in, and Kane felt a surge of pride as he watched them operate with precision. But as the human outpost gained the upper hand, a sudden jolt shook the station. What was that? Harris shouted, bracing himself against the console. Another ship. Kane wondered aloud, eyes narrowing at the radar. A new signal appeared, an unknown vessel, unlike anything they had encountered before, entering the fray. What the hell is that? Harris exclaimed, staring at the screen in disbelief. I don't know, Kane admitted, his voice tense. But we need to find out fast. The new ship loomed closer, its silhouette dark against the backdrop of stars. As it approached, the Atraxian ships began to scatter, confusion rippling through their ranks. Can you get a read on it? Kane asked, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. Harris worked furiously at the console, the data streaming in. Wait. I think it's a human ship. The realization hit Kane like a shockwave. What? How did they find us? As the unfamiliar ship engaged the Atraxian forces, a newfound hope ignited within Kane. This was no ordinary ship, it was equipped with advanced technology, something they had not seen before. Can you establish a communication link? Kane asked, his excitement barely contained. Trying now. Harris replied, fingers dancing across the console. As the connection established, a familiar voice crackled through the speakers. This is Commander Elise Parker of the Starfire. We're here to assist. Kane's heart swelled at the sound of her voice. Commander Parker, it's good to hear from you. We could use all the help we can get. We've been tracking the Atraxian movements. When we saw the attack, we couldn't just sit back. We're here to back you up, she said, determination evident in her tone. Together, the human forces rallied, their spirits ignited by the arrival of the Starfire. The tide of battle shifted once more as they fought side by side, coordinating their attacks against the Atraxian fleet. Let's show them what we can do. Kane shouted, rallying his crew as they pushed forward. With the combined might of their ships, they targeted the Atraxian vessels, their defenses crumbling under the onslaught. But as they pressed their advantage, a new danger loomed. A massive Atraxian warship, unlike anything they had seen, appeared on the horizon. It was larger, more menacing, and armed with devastating weaponry. Everyone, brace for impact. Kane shouted, his heart racing. The battle intensified as the warship unleashed a torrent of firepower, forcing the human ships to scramble for cover. The Starfire held its ground, returning fire with precision. We need to disable their weapons systems. Parker yelled, her voice steady as she guided her crew through the chaos. On it. Kane replied, focusing on the warship as he directed their fire toward the exposed sections of its hull. Explosions erupted around them as the two forces clashed in a desperate struggle for survival. The humans fought valiantly, their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that they were no longer alone in this fight. Despite the overwhelming odds, they pushed back, their determination igniting a fire within them. But the warship was relentless, its firepower devastating. Kane could see the toll it was taking on his crew, but they held their ground, refusing to yield. "Keep firing. We can't let up," he shouted, his voice hoarse from the intensity of the battle. As the fighting raged on, the tide shifted once more. The Atraxians were losing ground, but the warship was still a formidable opponent. "We need a plan," Kane said, his mind racing as he assessed the situation. "If we can distract them, we might have a chance to disable their weapons." Parker nodded, her expression determined. "I'll lead a diversionary attack. We'll draw their fire while you target their weapons systems." "On my mark." With a shared understanding, they prepared for the next phase of the battle. As the starfire surged forward, drawing the attention of the warship, Kane's crew targeted its vulnerable spots. "Now!" Parker shouted, and the two ships engaged in a coordinated assault. Explosions lit up the void as the Atraxian warship reeled under the onslaught. "Focus fire on the weapons array," Kane commanded, his heart racing as they pushed forward. The warship was strong, but the determination of the human forces was unwavering. With each shot fired, the warship's defenses weakened. They could see the damage taking its toll as the ship faltered, the Atraxian crew scrambling to regain control. "Keep up the pressure. We're almost there," Kane shouted, his voice filled with urgency. As the final blast hit the warship's weapons systems, a blinding explosion erupted, sending debris scattering into the darkness of space. The Atraxian ship was crippled, unable to respond as the humans pressed their advantage. With the warship disabled, the remaining Atraxian forces began to scatter. The tide of battle had shifted, and the humans emerged victorious, their spirits soaring with the thrill of triumph. Cheers erupted throughout the command center as Kane and Parker shared a victorious glance. They had fought against impossible odds and emerged victorious, a testament to their strength and resilience. As the celebrations continued, a new sense of purpose filled the air. They had proven themselves, but the war was far from over. The Atraxian coalition would not easily forget this defeat, and Kane knew they had to remain vigilant. Days turned into weeks as they fortified their defenses, preparing for the inevitable counterattack. The victory had strengthened their resolve, but Kane could sense that the Atraxians were plotting their revenge. Amidst the preparations, Kane found himself drawn to the Starfire, spending time with Parker and her crew. They exchanged stories, shared strategies, and forged a bond that transcended their individual missions. The camaraderie was a lifeline in the face of the looming threat. But as they trained and prepared, whispers of discontent began to spread among the human ranks. Some members of the crew felt emboldened by their victory, while others worried about the Atraxian retaliation. Kane found himself walking a fine line, balancing the optimism of victory with the harsh realities of war. One evening, as he sat alone in the command center, reviewing the latest intelligence reports, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The reports indicated unusual Atraxian activity, a buildup of forces that made him uneasy. "Lieutenant, you need to see this," Harris said, entering the room with urgency. Kane looked up, his heart racing. "What is it?" Harris gestured toward the screen, where a live feed displayed the Atraxian fleet in motion. "They're mobilizing, massive numbers. They're preparing for something big." The weight of Harris's words hung in the air, and Kane felt a chill run down his spine. They were gearing up for an all-out assault, and this time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. "Get the crew together," Kane ordered, his voice steady. "We need to strategize. We won't let them take us by surprise again." As the crew gathered, the tension was palpable. Kane faced them, determination etched on his features. "The Atraxians are mobilizing, and we need to prepare for their attack. This is not just about defending the outpost, it's about standing up to an empire that wants to erase us from existence." Harris added, "We've seen what they can do. We need to fortify our defenses and gather intel on their movements." The crew nodded, their resolve strengthening as they focused on their preparations. They worked tirelessly, reinforcing the outpost's defenses, analyzing Atraxian strategies, and ensuring they were ready for whatever came next. But as they prepared, Cain felt the pressure mounting. He was the leader, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on him. He had to ensure the safety of his crew, but he also had to instill a sense of hope amidst the fear. Days passed as they prepared for the impending assault, and Cain's heart raced with anticipation. The time for fighting back had come, and he was determined to lead his crew into battle once more. When the day finally arrived, the outpost was on high alert. Sensors picked up movement, an entire fleet of Atraxian ships heading their way, the numbers staggering. Cain's heart pounded in his chest as he rallied his crew for one last briefing. "Today, we stand together," he declared, his voice steady and unwavering. "We've trained for this moment, and we've faced the odds before. We are not alone in this fight. We are humanity, and we will not back down." With the battle cry echoing in their hearts, the crew took their positions, ready to face the oncoming storm. As the Atraxian fleet approached, Cain's resolve hardened. "Steady," he shouted as the first blasts from the Atraxian ships illuminated the void. The outpost shook under the impact, but they held their ground. "Return fire," Cain commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos as they targeted the incoming vessels. Explosions erupted, lighting up the darkness as the two forces clashed. But as the battle raged, Cain's heart sank at the sight of the Atraxian warship leading the charge. It was the same vessel they had fought against before, and he knew it would not be an easy fight. "Concentrate fire on that warship," he shouted, determination etched on his face. "We need to take it down if we stand a chance." As they targeted the massive ship, the intensity of the battle escalated. The Atraxians pushed forward, their tactics ruthless as they sought to overwhelm the human defenses. The station rocked under the onslaught, but Cain's crew fought valiantly, refusing to yield. They were united in their purpose, their spirits ignited by the determination to protect their home. The warship took heavy damage, but it continued to press forward. Cain could see the Atraxians rallying around it, their confidence bolstered by the looming presence of their flagship. "Keep firing. We can't let them regroup," Cain shouted, urging his crew on. The battle felt endless, but they pressed on, their resolve unyielding. The tide began to shift once more as they targeted the warship, its defenses faltering under the relentless assault. With one final push, they unleashed everything they had, and the warship exploded in a blinding flash of light, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. A cheer erupted from the crew, their spirits soaring with the thrill of victory. But Cain knew the fight wasn't over. The Atraxians were still pressing their attack, their numbers overwhelming. As the battle raged on, Cain felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced the darkness together, and he knew they would continue to fight for their survival. With determination fueling him, he rallied his crew once more, guiding them through the chaos. Together, they fought back, pushing against the tide of destruction, refusing to let the Atraxians take their home. And in that moment, amidst the explosions and chaos, Cain knew that they would prevail. They were humanity, and they would not back down. The battle for survival had just begun, and they were ready to face whatever came next.